Hello, and welcome to Can't Find My Brain for the Fog with Kendra
and Gina, discussing love, loss, and life after.
All right, and welcome back to Can't Find My Brain for the Fog. This is week 2.
Yep.
We are going to talk a little bit about what happens after, what you're dealing with after. But before we get into that,
Kendra made a mistake.
I made a mistake last week.
Classic brain fog.
Although I'm not, like I said, I'm not sure I can blame brain fog on this, but it's something. I said that Jim and I had only been married 6 years. That's not true. We had actually been married 7 years. We had celebrated our 7th anniversary about 4 months before he passed away. So I can't even say, it just happened because there was 4 months. But anyway.
Mm-hmm. We get our dates. Sometimes dates are wrong. Sometimes I have to think about how old I am.
Oh, yeah. I always have to think about how old I am.
Yeah.
But, it happens. Do the best we can, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, today's topic, we wanted to talk about, what happens after, what happens next. So with that, I guess we want to start with, when it happens, what happens, right?
Yeah.
We kind of talk about.
And I think we both talked about, both of us lost our husbands suddenly.
Yes.
So I can't say what it feels like to know your loved one's going to go, like in a long illness. So, your experience may not be like our experience if someone's listening to this who lost their husband from cancer, but there's no good or bad way to lose a husband. There's no good way.
There's no good way.
There's nothing good about it. But that's just saying we had, maybe our experience may not be like yours, just that we were hit blindsided.
Different perspective, for sure. But in my case, I'm trying to think about how I want to say this. I just remember being in shock that night. It was unexpected. I remember making the calls. I still remember what all, I remember who I called. I remember standing in the yard. I remember all the people coming to my house. I remember being at the hospital, being surrounded by all these people. My husband was a corrections officer and he had been a firefighter for many years in our community. And so there were a lot of people in that ER.
Right.
There were a lot of people. And I appreciate it. You appreciate that because you appreciate that people care and they love your person that you love. But there's a lot of people.
Yeah, your brain is just in numb mode.
Yeah.
Maybe you already go into denial, but I remember the same. I don't know how many people came and went in the hospital room. I do remember we were still supposed to be wearing masks. We had just, it was 2022.
It was on the cusp of COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were supposed to be, but the hospital didn't enforce that, thank goodness, because, but I just remember saying, what do I do?
Right.
And I remember my mom saying, well, you get up tomorrow morning. My mom's that kind of person. She's like, you get up tomorrow morning. But I didn't really know what to do next. And I remember just being in the hospital about 4 hours. And my boss, and at that time, it had dwindled down. Everybody else was either outside waiting. It was just me, my boss, and my coworker in the room alone. And he said, this is what we're going to do. And he basically told me what I was going to do, and this is how it was going to go, and then we were going to go home.
Right.
And I needed that because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was right, what was wrong.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, I didn't really have anybody telling me, I did have, I remember I was in there, my stepdaughter had come in and out. The rest of Jim's family and his other stepkid, his other son, I keep my tongue tied, sorry. His other son lived in Ohio, so none of them could be there, right? So it was mostly just my family and friends, and then of course his fire family, his corrections family, they were all there. But I remember in the ER, my stepdaughter had been in and out. Her mom had brought her. My mom had been in and out, but she had taken on control of his phone and contacting family, which is what I needed.
Right.
admittedly, I'm a little bit of a control freak sometimes. Like, I'm very easygoing about a lot of things, but, like, it's one of those, I'm easygoing about most things, but, like, when life is chaotic, I want to be in control because it gives me some control to the chaos, right? But at that moment, I needed to give up that control. I needed to let my mom take that on. And she needed a task to do because she was fretting, she was worrying, she was stressing. And if I didn't, and I love my mom, but my mom is a worrier. It's her nature. And if she's listening to you, you are, Mom. I love you very much, but you are a worrier.
Right. Oh, yeah. I see that.
But she needed a task to do in that moment, and I really needed somebody to take that control because I really wasn't in the frame of mind to be doing that, and it needed to be done. Like, his family was all in Ohio, and I contacted his siblings so that they would be with his parents before his parents got news, and I was trying to do all that before it hit social media because
we talked about that.
Small towns, right? Like, everything gets on social media so quickly here, and in our little community, when ambulance shows up for something heart related, fire department generally does too. And so I had ambulance and fire. That's how my neighbors figured out what was going on, was because there was an ambulance here and a fire department was here and the sheriff's department was here. And by the time we got to the hospital, I think half the town thought there had been a fire at our house, which was not the case. It was just with all those emergency crews at my house. That was the conclusion that had been drawn. So we were trying to get, I needed to get ahead of that too, because there's so many agencies involved that wanted to get their prayers out, right? And people want to get people mean well. People mean well. Yeah. They want to acknowledge and pray and say, think about this person, but at the same time, the family needs a little control, and I was trying to get ahead of it, and so thankfully my mom was taking control of that. She was taking control of all the people in the emergency room because, to be honest, that was a lot of people in that waiting room. And I don't do well when there's a lot of people hovering around me. Like, I need space, and everybody just wants to be helpful. So they just and I just need space. I'm like, I can't. And one of my dearest friends, like, I remember calling her. I called her and my mom and my stepdaughter, because I knew that she could get here quickly. Like, my parents are 30 minutes away. I knew that she could get here quickly, and I needed somebody with me.
Right.
And she came immediately, and then she came to the hospital. She took me to the hospital. And she was with me the whole time. And, like, I just remember her texting me later, being like, I'll come over in a heartbeat, it. But I also know that you need your space. So, let's talk about what you need. And, like, I appreciate that for her, because a lot of people assume they know what you need, but sometimes people don't know what you need. And that can be overwhelming, especially when you're in a fog and you're already overwhelmed.
Right. We talked about that too, about social media. It's a blessing and a curse.
Yes.
Because in the minutes literally after my husband was gone, and I knew the word was going to get out.
I think I found out about it on social media.
Yeah, well, and I had a cousin who meant well, but put it on social media before I could even be home from the hospital. And my first thought was, I've got to tell my sister-in-law, who needs to tell my mother-in-law, who's in another country, who, you didn't want to wake her up in the middle of the night, but you didn't want to wake up and read it.
Right, like my family was just, another state. Your family was
it's
a whole other time zone country situation.
Yeah, it's hard, but that's the first thing, I tell people, don't I appreciate that, but don't rush it. Like, make sure that the family has had time to hear and the situation. But I hear.
It was Jim was on social media before I got home too.
Yeah. It was.
And granted, I felt like we were at the hospital for 10 hours, but I think it was probably only like 4, like you said. I think we were probably home by 10 or 11 o'clock that night, even though it felt like it was like 3 a.m.
Yeah.
But I think I was just exhausted, and it was just so much going through your mind. And that's the thing, like, when it happens, there is so much going through your mind, because you're trying to grieve, but at the same time, immediately you have to start making all these decisions. Like, we couldn't find anything that confirmed whether or not Jim was an organ donor, but I kind of felt like he would want to do that. Like, and I talked to my stepdaughter, we kind of felt like that was a decision that he would have done. But again, that's a decision you have to make right there in that moment.
Yeah, and you do have, yeah.
And it has to be quick. You know?
I think I know that I've got the phone call about Tim collapsing like around 6 o'clock. That may not be exactly right, but I left the hospital like 11:30. Yeah. But somewhere in that time, I knew he wanted to be an organ donor, and I don't know why, but he wasn't viable to be an organ donor. He could only donate tissue. I don't know why that is. But I remember the phone call to answer questions was like a 45-minute phone call. Yeah. And it was like tedious. And I remember my boss sitting there looking at me like, what are they asking that for? You know, like, you know, does he ever go to a foreign country? Well, he's from a foreign country. Has he ever done drugs? Probably.
Right.
I don't know. You know,
I was with him his whole life.
I pretty much knew the answers to all the questions. But I'm like, why? You know, I wish that could have been done pre.
Maybe there is a way to do that.
Yeah, to do that pre. I'll need to ask a friend of mine.
That needs to be a pre-check thing, not a thing you have to do in the moment.
Yeah, not while you're just frustrated and listening.
Yeah, I don't remember if that phone call happened that night or if it was the next day. I was thinking the next day, but it might have been that night.
They took him that night to Louisville,
I know they took him
Kentucky,
that night.
And then the next day, the funeral home brought him back.
They may not have taken him that night for Jim. Mm-hmm. In my case, they may have taken him the next day. There may have been an issue about getting somebody to pick him up. That may have been what it was.
It could have been, yeah.
I feel like, I don't remember. I know that I know that I was thankful for the funeral home director because she was there. She showed up immediately. She just jumped right in and handled so many things. Like, but yeah, it's just a lot that you have to think about, like making funeral plans if you don't have those in writing. And that's one of the things I have told, like all of my friends have been at, you know, they would ask me, what can we do? Go home and write down your funeral plan. That was something I legitimately told some of my friends because, you know, I'm in my 30s. Jim was, this going to be, I don't want to say because I'm going to be wrong. I want to say he was 42, but I may be wrong about that because I swear I told the dispatcher the wrong age when I called that night. That was a running joke with us for a while because I kept saying the wrong age because I can never keep people's ages straight.
I mean, either.
Legit. Well, that's something I tell, you know, I'm like, go home and write it down because you don't think about it. At my age, necessarily, people don't have their plans in place, and you need to.
You need passwords written down. You need, you know, some people can't get in their husband's phones.
Right.
I lost my husband's phone. It was, he actually died at a workout place, and the first thing I did is send somebody looking for his phone and his keys. And they found his keys, but no phone. And I figured somebody picked the phone up and was going to take it. Oh, no. But then the next day, and so I tried to get the policeman to ping it. For some reason, I didn't have him on Find My Phone. I wasn't tech savvy, so I don't even know if I could have done that. But later on, when they started putting signs up, hey, have you found this phone? All of a sudden, these friends of mine, they said, we know right where he put his phone. Every morning he came in and put his towel, his phone, and his keys in the same spot. They went right to that spot and the phone was there, a place they'd looked a million times.
So somebody had put it
So we think somebody put it back. But, you know, I knew his password to get into the phone.
Yeah,
some people don't know their husband's passcode.
Yeah. I knew Jim's passcode.
Yeah, so, you know, those are things to know. And
you know how it's over now.
I was just thankful that, like you said, my cousin came on my husband died on a Friday. My cousin was there by Sunday. She stayed 3 weeks with me. My sister-in-law came on the Sunday because I wanted her input on planning because I didn't want to do anything to disrespect my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
I wanted to be very socially conscious of what it's like in other countries. What do they do?
Right.
And I didn't want to plan without her having a voice. Yeah. And but my cousin took charge and she helped me, you know, cancel things, get things changed, and she was like she could pretend to be me on the phone, and you need that person. Yeah. I'm like you said.
And my mom kind of she came and camped out on my couch for a week. She probably would have stayed longer, but I at that point was like, no, Mom, you gotta go home because I gotta start figuring out how to live. Yeah, and that does not. Normal life is not you on the couch.
I wasn't as tough as you. I needed 3 weeks plus.
I don't know that I was tough, but it was just a moment of like, as much as I want to stay here and do nothing and not move, I can't.
Yeah.
I've got to get up and keep going, you know? But yeah, she during that time she helped me. You know, she wrote down everybody that came in with food or stuff, or you know, because we had all these people coming through trying to help us with stuff, and I had so much food. I had for a person who, you know, pretty much lives alone, that was a lot of food. I was giving people food because
Right.
there was so much food, which I'm
I was
thankful.
feeding people.
I was feeding my
people on my
neighbors.
porch.
I was
Yeah.
sending stuff home with my stepdaughter to her mom's house. Like, I sent food home with my mom. I was feeding everybody. And it's great that people want to help, you know, and that's wonderful. But like I said, I had my mom. She was helping me brainstorm. We were trying to write down all the things. Like, she was trying to help me write down all the funeral related things, because I had been through helping with like my grandparents' funerals, but I had never done that for, you
I
know,
loved
in this
you had
case,
not been the
primary
plan.
person. I was always the support crew for somebody else.
I like how you said your mom wrote down everything that
Yeah.
people brought, and
Yeah.
my mom was asking me to do that, and I refused because I said I'm not sending thank you cards. I'm a bad person.
No, you're not a bad person. I think it's just different. Like, I don't know if culturally is the right way to say it, but like,
I think it's the age.
it could be, yeah. And my family, like, it's very much a culturally you send thank you cards to people thing. I am terrible at it. I think when I was cleaning once, I still found thank you cards from her wedding. So that tells you how bad I am about sending
My mom would send a thank you card for getting a thank you card for a thank you card, and I just thought,
like, I'm not good at thank you cards, but I do have, like, my mom and a friend of mine sat down after the funeral and helped me write out thank you cards to everybody for food and for. There were a few people that I really wanted to try to get them to. Like, I wanted to send one to dispatch because
Yeah.
they were so helpful. You know, I tried to send one to the sheriff's department, to the EMS. Although I swear I can't remember that I'm not sure if I actually got one sent to EMS. No.
see, that's when social media is great.
Yeah,
because
you can just thank you,
that's
and
when
I did that.
think,
I did that a lot.
You know, and I think I personally thanked people, and since then I have.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest ways I thank people is I wanted to make sure that I maintained relationships with people that were important to my husband,
Yeah.
and people that, you know, I wanted to love those who loved him. And another thing, like you
guys
said,
you've done a lot for that. Like,
when
in
you know,
that
you
case.
said you wanted, you at some point in time you decide there's a song called Hallelujah Anyway, where it says, you know, he says I'd rather strike a match. I think I'd rather strike a match than curse the dark, and that's the way I think I am. I know I did not want to live there. You're never going to forget,
Right.
and you're never going to be the same.
Right.
But you've got to decide, I'm going to curl up on this couch and die,
Right. Are you gonna keep going?
or I'm going to keep going, and which honors your loved one most.
Yeah.
But,
And I think it helps to have people around you to support you through that. And I think, you know, I'm not always a people person. Like, I'm an introvert, and I tend to get comfort in just a few people, not a big group of people. Like, a big group of people is exhausting to me.
And I'm
But,
polar
like,
opposite. So.
one of the way, you know,
Dark and night here, girls.
One of the things that did bring me comfort, as weird as it, like, my dogs, as crazy it was, I had, you know, Jim and I had 2 dogs. I had a dog before we met, and then another one kind of appeared around the same time Jim joined the family. Like, they joined around the same time. And my younger dog was definitely a daddy's boy. But those dogs got me through it, like, you know. And I am thankful. There's another reason I'm thankful to the funeral home. They allowed me to bring my dogs to see Jim.
That's awesome.
When he passed. My dad went with me, and, like, they had a chair set up for us, and the dogs could get up in the chair and then sniff. And my older dog, she was a little bit more hesitant about, like, she recognized. You could say, "Hey, Dad," you know, "that's Daddy," and she would look.
Aww.
You know, so she recognized that was her daddy.
That's so awesome.
But she didn't necessarily, like, she sniffed a little bit, but she didn't really get up there. But my younger dog, I think if we hadn't held on to him, he'd climbed up in the casket with him. Like, he was like leaned over sniffing, checking him out. Because he was a daddy's boy.
Animals miss. I mean, I don't have
do.
animals, but they miss
They do.
loved ones.
And that, I think it helped because they weren't looking for him. You know,
Right.
they knew that something had happened that night. They knew there was a lot of chaos and emotion and people in the house, and that's not typical for us. And they knew there was something going on, and they were very much, like, glued to us after, you know, the day after, and, like, trying to figure out what was going on with all the people in and out. And I do think it helped.
Yeah.
And I think my younger dog became my Velcro dog. I joked that he was my Velcro dog after that. Like, he was very much glued to me
Yeah.
all the time. But unfortunately, I've since lost both of them, and so that was tough. But I think I always say that it was the good Lord and my dogs got me through it. Honestly,
Think about the thing you're most thankful for in like day next morning, the morning after. Like what? I mean, is there a person you're most thankful? I think your mom
my
definitely.
mom was there. She was very helpful. One of my dear friends was there. She was bringing coffee and stuff, and that's always my.
That yeah, somebody that
brings you stuff like she came and washed dishes for me. Like she was washing dishes and cleaning my house, and my neighbor across the street, I can't not forget, she immediately came over that night and took care of the dogs because they'd taken care of the dogs for me before. She, I had dinner in the oven. She turned off my oven. She put the food away.
Oh,
She
awesome.
she just she started cleaning my house because she couldn't sleep while we were at the hospital. She was here cleaning the house.
Yeah.
For me, and like she cleaned, and she was in and out cleaning the next day. She was cleaning my house, like,
Yeah.
and I'm not a good housekeeper, and it gets piled up really easily.
Oh no.
But like she cleaned so much, like they were both, and I just was so grateful for
I'd
both
walk
of
in
them.
and not know whose house it was.
Right,
if my
like it
house
was
really
spotless
clean.
compared to like
Yeah.
I was like, whose house am I in? Where's all my stuff?
I think I was thankful that I left the hospital room. Like I said, this is night and day sitting here. Kendra's
Yeah.
little more,
I'm much
not
more.
not too many people. I like a lot of people, but I think one of the biggest blessings is when I got home. I had probably 10, 15 people on my porch waiting. My coworker drove me home, and we spent another probably couple hours on the porch. And my mom and my coworker stayed with me that night. My one friend helped me get a contact out of my eye because my contact had rolled up in my crying.
Yeah.
Your contact rolls back up in your head, and
don't
I think
miss
you
wearing
get to a
contacts.
point where you think you can't cry anymore.
Yeah. You're just exhausted.
But I've learned that 3 years down the road almost, you can still cry anytime.
We had a lot of people, and I was grateful for every single person that came to the hospital. Don't get me wrong. Like, even though I'm not, Jim was so much more a people person than I am.
Yeah.
And he could be friends with anybody. He could walk in and talk to everybody. And so he had a ton of people, and I'm so grateful for everyone that came to the hospital. So don't mistake me there. I appreciated all of those people and all the things they were there for, because they were there for us. They wanted to be there to support me and because they loved him, and I just, it's one of those things that, like, you don't realize how many people you impact
Oh, yes.
while you're alive. And I think we as humans don't do a good job of telling people how much they mean to us when we're alive. And it's not until people die that you show up to their funeral and you cry and you're like, and so I've tried to do better about that in my life, of like letting people know what they mean to me.
Yeah.
But like in that case, like there was just so many people, and I guarantee you my husband had no idea. And I love hearing those stories. I've heard so many of those stories after the fact, and maybe we'll talk about that down the road of like some of the silver linings. Maybe that's something we can touch on. But like, I just remember his sweet mama. She's since gone, but she was floored at the number of people that came to the funeral.
Yeah, my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law said, well, why are we going to have a visitation that long? And
Yeah.
my friend said, because everybody in 3 counties is going to come.
Right.
And
It was kind of the same way for us.
yeah, I think it's meaningful. And I think about the kids that came through.
Yeah.
My husband was a tennis coach, and all the little kids and I had 2 guys come through I had 2 people come through our visitation that I did not recognize. Because one of them, it was out of context for me, and the other one I hadn't seen in years. And when I went back and looked at the log, I said, now I know who they were. And they were kids that he had taught when they were in high school.
Yeah.
One of them was in high school, and then the other one was somebody that he knew that I didn't really know. But the one thing that you said about not knowing what you mean to people, I've tried to, when somebody crosses my mind, I try to text them.
Yeah.
I'm not good about cards. I'm not good about gifts, but I want people to know you crossed my mind today.
So you're a words of affirmation person.
I think I am. Yeah, I definitely am that. My husband was definitely a acts of kindness, and I'm or acts of service, and I was definitely words of affirmation because I'm a
I feel like
wordy
I'm more an
person.
acts of service person.
But I think that's why the thing that comes to my mind when we think about we're quotes people, and the quote I thought of today was, "Though sorrow may linger, love remains forever, and you need to remember their light and let it guide you." And that's why I thought in those early days, you don't really want to do anything, but you knew you had to keep going because you want their light to live on in you.
Right.
And that's how I think.
I think trying to catch my brain up to what we were saying there.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good.
Brain is still in a fog.
My brain is still slowing down here. But yeah, I think we need to do better about telling people we love that we love them, and do better about telling people what they mean to us. And,
right.
And just taking a minute. And I think it's important in all of this to show yourself grace. Like I think I said that in the first episode, and I'll continue to say that, of like, show yourself grace. If there's people you know going through this, show them some grace. Because, you know, I think we should all show each other a little more grace, period, in life. That's just kind of my general... I try to give people grace. For a lot of my stepdaughter tells me I'm too nice to people, but I do. I try to give people grace because you don't know what someone's going through. You don't know what their struggle is. So,
you know, and it's this is not a quote I was going to use today, and I'm not even going to probably quote it, but I think you've shared it with me, is if you can't understand why somebody is still grieving, consider yourself lucky.
Right.
Because you really never know till it hits you.
Right.
When you say you can't imagine, you don't really want to imagine, and you don't. Yeah, definitely true.
Which reminds me of, you know, from someone I follow, one of those, I guess, influencer, I don't know if that's the right term, is One Fit Widow, and her name, Michelle Baumgard, and that's one of the things that she says is, you know, she talks about how, like, she wishes everybody could understand her perspective without getting the experience.
Yes, I can understand that.
She wishes they could go through, gain our perspective without having to gain the experience that got that perspective. Yeah. And that's valid. Like, there's so many people that sometimes you just want to shake people and you wish you could. But anyway, try not to get too far off.
Empathy is something my husband used to say is dying in our culture. People don't want to, they can't empathize enough with other people. They don't want to put themselves in their shoes.
It could be.
And like you said, you want to be able to put yourself in their shoes without having to be in their shoes.
Right. I don't wish that experience.
I agree.
Anyway. Yeah. So, I guess that'll about wrap it up. I'll give you one more quote for today. It's from David Jones, and it says, "And life went on. It was not the same, but it went on." And I think that's accurate, because for me, that's one of the things I had to tell myself the next day. And I kept telling my mom that, because she was very concerned, I think, that I was gonna, I don't know, I think she was afraid that I needed to grieve more than I was grieving, because we're just a little different and we grieve differently, she and I. I love you, Mama. I'm not sure if I already said that, but I love you, Mama. But she was very worried about that, and I told her, I said, Mom, life goes on. Like, I can't just become a shell. Like, I have to, you know, it's going to be different, and it sucks. Pardon my French there. And, you know, there's a lot of adjectives I could use to describe the situation. It's not awesome, but it's like life goes on.
It's like one of my friends, Wendy, said when her cancer came back for the second time, you know, she says, nobody really knows what to say. She said, I wish they would just say cancer sucks.
Because it does.
So I think the one thing I said to you when you joined this crappy club, it's a crappy club.
Right.
But we're both in it, and we don't want anybody else to be in it, but when your time comes, which your time will come, I mean, unfortunately, I hope it's not soon, but
when you join
we will be there to help you navigate.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening to us ramble.
And we'll
I like it. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to Can't Find My Brain for the Fog, discussing love, loss, and life after with Kendra and Gina. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and look for new ones each week. We're going to shoot for Mondays. If you would like to give us some feedback, or maybe leave us a topic idea or question, you can find us on Instagram, Can't Find My Brain for the Fog, and we would love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in.